We are joined on the line right now by former Secretary of Defense and the author of a new book called Rumsfeld Rules. Donald Rumsfeld is with us now. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us here on WMAL.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
We're going to get to talk about the book in a moment, but there is news that is breaking today. The president is apparently going to give a speech today in which he announces a new phase in the war against terror. He's going to talk about limiting the use of drones, and this comes on the heel of a big announcement yesterday. A letter was sent to Capitol Hill from the Justice Department acknowledging for the very first time that 4 Americans have been killed with U.S. drones abroad, and in fact, some of these were collateral damage. When you heard that acknowledgement, what was your thought, and how do you feel about the continued use of drones?
Well, I think there's a proper use for a drone, and obviously there are times that you can use a drone improperly. I think it's a technology that's arrived. It's going to be used in our country and by other countries, and certainly even in the private sector they'll end up being used. They're efficient. There are important issues that the president needs to address, and I think he very likely will eventually address them with the Congress as well, because there'll be a congressional role in the policy that evolves, and it's conceivable that the courts could even become involved.
Do you think that the drone policy had gone too far under the Obama administration?
I don't know, and that's one of the rules in Rumsfeld Rules. If you don't know, say you don't know. And I admit I don't. I'll be interested to hear what he has to say and what he's proposing. It is interesting that killing people instead of capturing them has broadly been supported, while capturing them has been opposed and holding them. The advantage, of course, of capturing someone instead of killing them is that you can ask them questions and find out some things that you may benefit you in your effort to try to protect the American people against the very serious threat of terrorists.
Secretary Rumsfeld, you talk about the terrorist attacks that you had to witness, unfortunately, right there in the Pentagon that day on September 11th, and that initiated what we Americans knew as the global war on terror. And now here we are, how many years later, and we had a Boston terror attack last month right here on our soil that was horrific. Yesterday we had that horrible attack in London. Do you look at these things and suggest maybe we have taken our eye off the ball in a global sense on the war on terror?
Well, I think that the fact that this administration is reluctant to even talk about it as a war on terror and to identify the enemy as radical Islamists and to be willing to compete against that radical ideology. People talk, once you use the word war, people think of World War II or Korea or something. Whereas this is much more like the Cold War. It's going to take decades. We're going to have to compete against it using all elements of national power to protect the American people, because we don't have good metrics as to how many people are being trained to go out and kill innocent men, women, and children.
Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld is our guest, and his new book is called Rumsfeld Rules. And you sort of alluded to, I think, what many people believe to be one of your more charming and famous sayings, which is knowing what you don't know. That was a really big part of your tenure heading up the Pentagon. And I wonder, when you look at stories like Benghazi currently and the various scandals that are bubbling up with the administration, are they suffering from not being aware of what they don't know right now? Is that a Rumsfeld rule that they could be following?
Well, I think they could use some of that advice, as all of us can over the years. But the problem they've got is that political leaders, government leaders in our country, we lead by consent, not command, and that means for people to believe us, we have to be believable, and we have to scrupulously avoid saying things that turn out in relatively short order to not be accurate. And one of my rules is, if you're lost, climb, conserve, and confess. Get some altitude, take a deep breath, and admit you've got to take time to figure out what actually happened. Find ground truth, and not say things that 15 minutes later turn out not to be true.
Yeah.
And looking through your biography, the details of your bio, I find that you were once the chief of staff to Gerald Ford. And I wonder, right now we seem to have a chief of staff and a staff around the president who are keeping him willfully out of the loop on many things. When you hear stories about what's going on, like with this IRS mess and their attacks against the Tea Party and how they kept that information from the president, when you were chief of staff, would something like that have made its way to the president's desk?
Absolutely. My goodness, I can't imagine. First of all, I don't know what's true at the moment, but my goodness, I don't see how a leader could allow staff people to not tell them the truth. Bad news does not get better with time. It gets worse. And the responsibility of the person we elected was the president. And a staff person is a staff person. And there's a notably different circumstance for a person who's on the staff and the person who's the principal. And you can't not tell the principal when things have gone wrong.
But that seems to be the modus operandi. In fact, they're bragging about that very fact today in a Washington Post story about this whole thing, saying, oh, no, it's our job to keep these things from the president.
That's interesting. The only time we've seen the president step up and take responsibility was it acted as though he was the one who killed Osama bin Laden. They had photographs, they had pictures, they had leaks to the newspapers. And in that case, he was deeply involved. And apparently in every other case, he not only is not involved, he went to Las Vegas.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me like all of the staff protecting the president, it falls under one of Rumsfeld Rules, and that is lawyers are like beavers. They get in the middle of the stream and dam it up.
Well, they do. We have a very litigious society today.
I wonder, speaking of lawyers, and one of the scandals that's popping up right now, Donald Rumsfeld, has to do with the administration, the Justice Department, going after leaks, and the reporters are now being implicated. I'm sure you're seeing how James Rosen of Fox News was cited as a co-conspirator in what seems to be somewhat an innocuous leak. I wonder what the fallout would have been if you had employed these same tactics after the Abu Ghraib leak, when those photos were leaked, which was a very damaging leak, as you can, I think, agree, to the Iraq War effort. Do you think the press would have been a little angry at the administration if they had started doing private subpoenas of reporters to find out where the leak came from?
Well, I first got involved in government when I went in the Navy in 1954, and I've never seen anything like this. Leaks can damage national security, there is no question. And government, administration after administration, have tried to figure out ways to prevent leaks. But the step that the United States government under the Obama administration has taken with respect to the Associated Press and the other examples that are now leaking out is, at least in my experience, unprecedented. And if the American people are deeply concerned about the idea of the Internal Revenue Service being turned against them, and they are concerned, imagine how the press people feel if the government gets turned against them in their important responsibilities of reporting the news.
Well, I'd love to have another hour to talk to you, but our time has run out. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, author of a new book. It really is good reading, Rumsfeld Rules. Thank you for joining us here on WMAL.
You bet. Good to be